The history of Hillbrook Insane Asylum is vast and impressive. We all know the asylum was founded in 1915 by Dr. Markway Hillbrook, but do you know the rest of the story? Dr. Markway Hillbrook, a renowned psychiatrist, was fascinated with the criminal mind, especially the abnormal criminal mind. Between the years 1902 to 1907, he worked as a doctor at the infamous Mountain Asylum. There he did his best to get a grasp on the mad minds of the patients and find a way to help them. Unlike his peers, Markway was actually interested in curing the criminally insane, not just locking them up and torturing them. Needless to say, he found his work surroundings appalling. Shadow Mountain was not a hospital, it was a butcher's house. Of course, the same could be said for all insane asylums at the time. After numerous failed attempts at reforming Shadow Mountain, Markway finally had enough and left. In 1908, he began his grand plans to build an asylum of his own, a place that truly sought to cure and not to punish. It stood finished in 1915, and it was named Hillbrook Insane Asylum. The building contained 100 cells, and the first of these cells, cell 000, became occupied immediately. The very first patient of Hillbrook, patient 000, was a man named George Dicer, nicknamed the Slicer by the press. Dicer was a psychiatrist just like Markway, and the two were in fact old friends. Like Markway, Dicer too was obsessed with the criminal mind. However, their methods differed considerably, to say the least. In order to learn what made criminals tick, Dicer kidnapped small-time hoodlums, sliced them open with a butcher's knife, and had a look inside. He felt that this way he could understand them and find a proper cure for criminal behavior. He began this research sometime in 1905 and wasn't caught by the police until 1913. He is to have killed somewhere between 30 to 40 people during this time. Dicer couldn't understand why the police arrested him when they did. After all, he was trying to help them with crime. He was sentenced to Blackburn Penitentiary for his crimes and was set to be executed in the electric chair. However, he was saved by his old friend Markway, who made deals with the judge and the warden of Blackburn. Markway argued that Dicer was insane, as he still couldn't understand he had done anything wrong. An insane man shouldn't be executed, he should be cured. With the construction of Hillbrook Asylum well underway, Markway reasoned that that was the best place for him. After serving 2 years in Blackburn, Dicer was transferred to Markway's care. 10 years later, in 1925, Dicer was completely rehabilitated and faced release. The first success story of Hillbrook Asylum. It seemed like the place was going to be everything Markway had envisioned. However, that turned out to be short-lived. In 1924, a patient named Nora Robbins had arrived at Hillbrook. She received the number 058. Robbins was a young woman who suffered from paranoid delusions. She murdered 2 boyfriends of hers, wrongly believing they were cheating on her. Markway treated Robbins personally, and over the years the two grew very close to each other. They in fact even began a love affair, despite the fact Markway was a married man. However, Markway had not succeeded in curing Nora's paranoid delusions, and soon she began to accuse him of cheating on her, cheating with his wife. She demanded that he got rid of his wife and married her instead. By now, Markway realized what a mistake it had been to romance the woman. Of course, love is blind, even in the insane asylum. Nevertheless, he ended the affair in 1927. A week later, Nora Robbins escaped Hillbrook in the middle of the night. She made her way to Markway's residence, grabbed a knife in the kitchen, and murdered Markway and his wife in their beds. With the same knife, she slit her own throat. With Markway dead, Hillbrook Asylum was in need of a new director. This duty fell upon one Dr. Peter Lawrence. Lawrence had worked at Hillbrook since 1919, but never really got along with his boss. Unlike Markway, Lawrence did not want to cure the patients with compassion. He wanted to cure them with torture. In order to remain on the Hillbrook staff, however, he had been forced to rein himself in. Now with Markway gone, though, and with him in charge, he could completely let loose. Lawrence transformed Hillbrook from a peaceful place of rehabilitation to a chamber of horrors. He introduced such methods as electroshock therapy, solitary confinement, boiling water treatments, sitting cages, crucifixion therapy, and early forms of very crude lobotomies. He was worse than anyone Markway had ever encountered at Shadow Mountain. It was now that the patients took to calling the place Hillbrook. Lawrence also had the asylum greatly expanded, adding room for 500 cells instead of just 100. Half a century later, it would of course be expanded again, making room for its current 1,000 cells. Anyway, Lawrence was also forced to deal with more difficult patients. As time went on, it seemed like the criminally insane simply got stranger. For instance, patient 116, macabre mafioso Burnham Weiss, aka the Victorian. Weiss was a bizarre individual indeed, who fancied himself a sort of vampiric ghoul. With his mob influences and scare tactics combined, he practically took over some parts of the asylum, flooding the place with contraband and corpses. Some say his ghost still stalked these halls. Then of course there was Lawrence's arch-nemesis, patient 085, Joseph Schultz, aka One-Eye Joe. One-Eye Joe was a psychotic hitman who worked for various mobs, including the Victorian. Really anyone was willing to hire him. He never used firearms, preferring to be up close to his victims, his favorite weapon of choice being a piano wire. One-Eye Joe was a bit of an escape artist too, breaking out of the asylum a total of 11 times. Lawrence did everything in his power to punish Joe, subjecting him to torture beyond your worst nightmares. But nothing could break the man's manic spirit. Following his final breakout in 1945, Joe decided to get revenge on Lawrence. He broke into his home while Lawrence was at work, and proceeded to strangle his wife and 2 kids. He was soon caught again afterwards, and just a few hours later, Lawrence held a private electroshock therapy session with Joe. Joe was never seen again alive. Supposedly it was an accident, but yeah, you can figure it out. After losing his family at the hands of this madman, Lawrence grew even more cruel. Similar accidents kept on occurring, and it seemed like every single patient Lawrence treated ended up dead in one way or another. The man had obviously gone on a demented killing spree. He used to want to cure the patients, albeit through harsh methods, to put it mildly. But now Lawrence wasn't interested in any of that. He viewed all the patients as diseased animals who simply needed to be put down. There was no cure and there was no redemption. Lawrence kept this up until 1949, when he finally resigned as director of Hillbrook. All in all, around 40 patients had died in the asylum during his time, although it's impossible to say just how many were due to Lawrence. All of these deaths and Lawrence's actions were swept under the rug by the new administration though, and none of it would become public knowledge until decades later. Lawrence was replaced as director by his own protege, Dr. Joshua Stone, an equally vicious man. Stone ran the asylum with an iron fist all the way up to the big riot of 1974. Perhaps that's a tale for another day, but suffice it to say, Markway's dream is by now long dead, and there is only Hillbrook.